Hopefully you all, I remembered as I was just about to get on the highway. Hopefully you all remembered that, like, the cafeteria is closed here, no coffee to be had this morning. I remembered, so I got myself a coffee, so I'm awake. Okay, we got a lot to do. So no cafeteria, no computer lab, right? But at least they brought Blackboard up before 6 o'clock today, so you were able to print if you wanted to at home. If you didn't want to waste paper, you didn't. If you have a printer, it's time. It's time. Couple of things before we get into it in detail. So my first job, I think I told you, I worked for Arthur Andersen, but on the consulting side, it was Accenture now, and they had a facility, and Accenture still has a facility in St. Charles, Illinois, which is about an hour west of Chicago, where like everyone would get together for training sessions. And I remember one of the first times I was there was during the Falklands War. You ever hear of the Falklands War? And it was fascinating because people from all over the world would be there, and I'd be in a class with somebody from Argentina and England during the Falklands War. I remember it well, having drinks with them at night and just talking about that war as it was going on. And so it was a very cool place to be. But in today's world, I'm sure they don't go out there anymore. They do it all online and don't have to spend money to send people out to Chicago. Anyway, always trying to find those things that you remember 20 years later. So this was a quote from one of the classes I had early on in my career. And they actually have a corollary to this quote in the textbook that they attribute to Yogi Berra. But I know Yogi Berra just a little bit. He doesn't know me. I know him because we play golf at the same club, and his locker's near mine, blah, blah, blah. He doesn't say any of the things he says. They're just good to put into books. But here's the quote: if you don't know where you're going, you will never be lost. What does that mean? If you don't know where you're going, you'll never be lost. Okay, so you're seeing it. So you're seeing this almost as a good thing. If you don't bother to know where you're going, then you're not going to feel the negativity of not getting there. Okay, sure. That's certainly a good way. Just enjoy the journey. Anyone else?
I guess you could always say that it's sometimes good to be lost because you have goals.
Good to be lost because you have goals. That's more or less where I was going with it. And in the context of our little, semester-long project, how many of you have given it any thought? One person, Andy. Two. And they're probably lying. So you're not worried about it, right? You're right. So you don't know where you're going. You don't feel lost yet. Well, it's time to start feeling lost. What's that? There you go. Perfect. Perfect. And that's true not only for our project. That's true for, we talked about strategy last week. A company without a strategy, hey, we're making 3% on our money or whatever it is. We're feeling pretty good. We got money in our pockets, etc. But maybe you're not doing as well as you could be. You don't feel lost because you don't know where you should be going. That's what this means to me, at least. So anyway, it's time to start to feel a little bit lost on your projects, because I think it should make you feel lost. 2 weeks from today, you'll be doing your first presentations, not next week but the week after, and all 9 groups will have a chance to present relatively quickly. It's going to be, just to give you a context of how much it's worth, it'll be like 5% of your grade. for that presentation, just like a quiz, if you would. And that will be a first chance to talk about your company, maybe talk about the strategy that you see your company have, maybe throw out some theses that you'd like to kind of draw on for the remainder of the presentations. So it's time to start thinking about it to the extent that you can. And it's hard. You don't really even know what cost of management accounting is, and yet you're going to be asked to start thinking about it. And for most of the companies, if not all, I can give you a little bit of directions to where I might go, but that's just where I might go. And so if you need that, just come see me, and we can talk about potential theses. At the end of the day, you're going to have a difficult time getting to the detailed numbers within your company, because these are internal numbers. Management accounting numbers are not financial accounting numbers. They're not meant for the outside world. And so you're going to have to stray a little bit away from kind of the number crunching side of management accounting and a little bit more towards kind of strategy and how you might use management accounting or cost accounting techniques in that company to improve where they are. And be bold. Again, be bold with what you say. An approach I've seen for very effective presentations, let's say there are 4 of you on a team, have 2 take one side of a point, have a thesis, have 2 take one side of a point of view, 2 take another side, create the yin and yang of of what you're suggesting, and then come up with why you think one of the 2 sides is the way you want to go in the end. That could be an effective approach. So there are different ways to do it. That's not the way I'm telling you to do it, but there are different ways to present things and get the message out. So start thinking about it for 2 weeks from today. Certainly the first presentation would include a discussion of the products, the strategy that company has. We'll talk quite a bit about costing systems today. That's really what today is about. And so you'll want to talk about the costing systems that they'll use within your company, etc. Secondly, I promise you guys can vote on whether you want the final to be 40% or 30%. If it's 30%, we'll just double up the my discretion from 10% to 20%. So talk among yourselves and vote. Well, right now I think the way we break out the grading is 20% for the midterm, 40% for the final, and 30% for the project, which includes 5% for the 2 interims, and then 20% for the big last deliverable. That adds up to 90%. 10% was at my discretion, based upon class participation, blah blah. We could make that 20%, and the final 30%. So there's a strong will for 30. Wow, that's a very. Okay, but because there's one really strong-willed person driving everybody, okay, put your heads on your desk, no pressure. You don't have to put your heads on your desk, that's okay. Does everybody want 20 and 30? It's fine by me. Okay, that's good. With that said, if you have your name tags, can you put them out so I could put little tick marks next to your name every time you talk? No, I'm not doing that. It appears that if you want to sit in the back row, you have to get here early. But there's plenty of room up front. Journal entries. Okay, so a lot of this a lot of management accounting involves journal entries. We're going to talk about them a little bit today. I don't like to talk about journal entries a lot. It's just who I am. But you may, because it may be something that you think is going to be important to you in your careers. So I'll talk about them a little. You'll notice when I give homework, I will give homework related to journal entries and how do you journalize certain things that, since all the homework is optional, it's more optional than the other homework in that I'll give you the homework, I'll give you the answers, but I'm telling you in advance I'm not going to put that on the test. So if you're interested in it, it's an opportunity for you to practice it. So I don't want you to lose that chance. But on the other hand, it's not going to be tested. And I tell you in the homework which questions are like that so that you don't need to do it if you don't want to, and you can do it if you do want to. The other part of the homework is I'm trying to only give 5, 6 questions per chapter. But if we do 3 chapters in a week, that's still 15 to 20 questions. That's a lot, and it's hard to do that much. But if you want more, ask, and I'll give you more questions. I just don't want to give you the entire answer book, because that's not fair to the publisher to have those answer keys floating out there as much. So, any question on the administrivia before we get going? I have 123 slides to get through today. At 1.4 minutes per slide. We'll see how far we get. Today is all about costing systems. Next week will be all about variance analyses. But today's all about costing systems. We started on it last week when we talked a little bit about some basic definitions of cost, which will probably repeat. I'm pretty sure today will be a lot of new stuff for you. I'm not going to go through again what we did last week, but I believe you guys can see that. We finished off, we were talking about controllable versus uncontrollable costs, opportunity and sunk costs. We finished up talking about product costs and period costs. And I let off there because what we're about to talk about leads right into costing systems. These are some definitions that might be new to you. Some definitions: a cost pool, a cost driver, and a cost object. Cost pools are some meaningful grouping of costs that you might want to understand how much costs are in a certain area. You could think of it as a department. A manufacturing department might be a cost pool. You want to pool your costs in that department to understand how much cost they are accumulating. A cost driver, which is very important in terms of allocating overhead, is any factor that has the effect of changing the level of total costs. And then a cost object is kind of the end game. Generally speaking, when you think about cost objects, you think about products. How much does it cost to develop a product? And for a service organization, it could be a service. And we'll talk about, hopefully later today, pooling it by customers, so that you could figure out how much does it cost to service a specific customer. So it's where you really want to kind of manage at the aggregate level would be a cost object. Okay, I think well, when you think about costs, and we talked about direct and indirect costs previously, direct costs can be easily traced to a cost pool or a cost object. Direct materials, you know where they're going. and so you could trace them easily. Indirect costs cannot be traced easily. You know, the cost of electricity in a building, and they, in some fashion, have to be allocated to your objects. And the means upon which you do that allocation is called your allocation basis. And you use cost drivers as your allocation basis. And we will get through that today. Some examples of cost objects and drivers: machine operation, setup, production schedule, etc. So if you want to understand how much it costs for machine operations, you may look at machine hours. How many hours has that machine been up and running? Setup is how long it took you to set up a batch or set up a run. Inspection could be driven by the number of pieces that you're inspecting. And you can see all of these. We don't need to go through all of them. So a cost driver is some kind of quantifiable measure of your cost object. And here's a nice, simple picture. So if you're ultimately you're a company that's making dishwashers and washing machines, you have various costs. You pool them into two departments, assembly and packing. So these would be your cost pools. These would be your cost objects. And then you'd have some kind of driver to figure out how much would go into each pool and ultimately into each object. And we'll see plenty of examples of this in the next couple of chapters to understand this better. But it shows how you're able to take these costs and associate them with some kind of an object, normally thought of as a product, but not always. I won't go through this, but here's a different view from a cost. This is for a medical insurer. You pool those costs, and then you have your objects, which are various delivery lines for that insurer. And examples of drivers are numbers of people, square footage as it relates to facilities, hours worked, etc. So cost drivers provide two functions. They allow you to do this cost assignment, and they help you to understand cost behavior. So if you increase the number of direct labor hours, if that's your driver, what effect would that have on your total cost? And there are four kinds of cost drivers. I don't really like these, which I'm just going to go right past. And there are different kinds of businesses out there. And in fact, as I assign the companies, I try to assign companies that have different kinds of business functions. The first would be a job shop. A job shop is defined by having a relatively low volume of output that is not standardized, and each product is unique. At one end of the spectrum would be Disney. They produce films. Each film, and they don't produce that many. Each film is unique, is different. There are costs associated with that film, developing that film. So you associate those costs directly to that job. That's one end of the spectrum, and we'll talk about those in detail in very, very shortly, the next chapter. Stepping down, the next is a batch job, and the example we use is Caterpillar, where they have multiple products. It's still low volume. They make big, big trucks, or factory equipment, or construction equipment. They have lots of different products, because each product is unique for the purpose at hand. They're very good at making products that are very unique for the construction business. So it's relatively low volume with lots of different products, and they produce them in batch. So they're not going to just make one of a certain type. They may make 50, but only 50. Then there's the assembly line approach, which would be like Ford, just churn out the cars. So they have a few major products at a relatively high volume. Then mass customization, Dell would be an example of that, where everyone has a slight little twist on the computer that they order. They have a standard computer that they hope you order since they have those ready, but everyone wants something a little bit different, so they mix and match the parts they put together to create your specific computer. And then there's continuous flow. Process costing is what we call that here, Chapter 6. And this is high volume, standardized commodity type products. And Exxon would be an example of that. And other oil and gas companies, or chemical companies as well. So it's these would be the two extremes that we'll learn about. And in here, the hybrids of those extremes. And the way that you do cost management is different between these two extremes, which is why we show this. Okay, so some qualitative considerations. Goes without saying, accuracy. So as you consider your internal cost information, you want to be accurate. Very important. Everything you do in business has a cost benefit. We'll talk about activity-based costing, hopefully today. It's a great way to do this costing, but it comes with a fairly high cost itself. And so is it worth that cost to do activity-based costing in your business or not? And then timeliness. The more detailed, the more exact, the longer it takes. And so you need to think about these issues as you're doing your costing to ensure that you're doing things in the appropriate way for your company. Okay? 10 minutes in, and we already have a breakout for your teams. But a short breakout this time. So for your company, identify, think about the products you have. Identify what might be some cost pools, some cost objects, and some cost drivers for your business. And just to simplify your thinking at this time, just think about the products that you create. Those will be cost objects. You can do it other ways, but for now, just think about it by products if you're not really sure what a cost object is yet. And think about processes in the value chain as your cost pools. So if you think about the value chains that you did last week, think about the various processes, and each one is a pool. Okay? So let's not spend too much time on this. Let's take 10 minutes, and we'll come back together. Maybe we'll talk briefly about it and move forward.
When I stop this, it doesn't record.
And then I do need to turn it back on, though.
No.
Oh, no?
No, it's going to stay on. As long as the light is green.